$2? Rage, hot and sharp, twisted in Saudi's gut. A billionaire, and this is what he leaves. She almost chased him, ready to spit curses into the Seattle rain. But something stopped her. A folded note taped under the greasy plate. A warning. Not just about him, but about her. About her father. They knew who she was. Knew about the factory accident 6 years ago. Only it wasn't an accident, was it? Compassion will be her only weapon? They think she's just a waitress, scraping by. They have no idea how her quiet kindness and a dead man's desperate gamble will turn their world inside out. But trust no one, especially not the police. This is the story of the $2 tip. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was 9:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of night where the neon sign of Jerry's Diner buzzed with the irritating sound of a dying insect. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and fryer grease, a scent that had woven itself into the very fibers of Sadie Boyd Cardigan. Sadie wiped down counter number 4 for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Her knuckles were red and chapped. At 26, she wore the exhaustion of someone twice her age. The digital clock on the wall mocked her. 15 minutes until closing. 15 minutes until she could go home to her studio apartment, count her tips, and realize once again that she was $80 short on rent. The bell above the door chimed, cutting through the drumming of the rain. Sadie sighed, dropping her rag into the sanitizer bucket. "We close in 15, she called out, not looking up. "I eat fast." The voice was low baritone and commanded the space immediately. Sadie looked up. The man standing in the doorway was an anomaly. Jerry's Diner was a place for truckers, tired nurses, and college students nursing hangovers. It was not a place for men like this. He was tall, wearing a charcoal wool coat that shed water like oil. Underneath a tailored suit fit him with military precision. He had silver fox hair, swept back, and eyes that were a piercing, unsettling shade of grey. He looked like he had just stepped out of a boardroom merger, or perhaps a funeral. "Booth in the back," Sadie said, grabbing a menu. "Coffee black and the steak rare." He moved past her, his cologne sandalwood and expensive tobacco overpowering the smell of grease. He sat in the darkest corner, his back to the wall, eyes scanning the exits. Sadie poured the coffee. Her hand shook slightly. She recognized him, or she thought she did. Not from the neighborhood, but from the newspapers left on the tables by morning commuters. Austin Pembroke, the real estate tycoon, the man who was currently buying up half the waterfront. Why was a man worth billions eating a $20 steak in a failing diner? She served him efficiently. She didn't hover. Rich people hated hovering. She refilled his coffee before it hit the halfway mark. She brought extra napkins. She was perfect. In her head, she was doing the math. If he's worth billions, a 20% tip is nothing. Maybe he drops 100, maybe 500. I could pay the rent. I could buy Leo his asthma meds. The hope was a dangerous thing. It made her smile genuine. "Is everything to your liking, sir?" she asked as he finished the last bite. Pembroke looked at her. Really? Looked at her. His gaze lingered on her name tag, then moved to the locket around her neck, a cheap silver thing holding a picture of her late father. "You're Thomas's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. Sadie froze the coffee pot suspended in midair. "Excuse me? You have his eyes." Sad eyes. Pembroke wiped his mouth with the napkin, dropping it onto the plate. "Check, please." He didn't explain. He didn't elaborate. Sadie's heart hammered against her ribs. Her father, Thomas, had died in a factory accident 6 years ago. It was a closed casket tragedy that had left her and her brother, Leo, with nothing but debt. How did this billionaire know a dead factory foreman? She printed the check, 42,50 house. She placed it on the table. Pembroke produced a crisp $50 bill from a leather clip. "Keep the change?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "No," Pembroke said coldly. "Bring me my change." Sadie felt the flush of humiliation creep up her neck. She walked back to the register, broke the 50, and returned with $7.50. Pembroke stood up, buttoning his coat. He took the $5 bill and the quarters. He left 2 single-dollar bills on the table, $2 on a $40 tab from a billionaire. He walked out into the rain without looking back. Sadie stared at the 2 crumpled bills. The rage was instantaneous. It wasn't just cheap. It was cruel. It was a message. You are worth nothing. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and angry. She grabbed the plate, ready to hurl it into the bus tub in the back. "Jerk," she whispered. She tilted the plate to scrape the leftovers into the bin. That's when she saw it. It wasn't just a napkin under the plate. Taped to the bottom of the heavy ceramic, protected from the grease, was a small folded piece of thick cream-colored stationery, and taped next to it was a small brass key. She looked around. The cook-old man Miller was out back smoking. The diner was empty. Sadie peeled the note off the china. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the key. She unfolded the paper. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "The $2 is for the cameras. They are watching you. They know who you are. Your father's accident wasn't an accident. Go to Union Station locker 402 tonight. Trust no one, especially not the police." Sadie looked at the door where Pembroke had vanished. The flashing lights of a passing car illuminated the window. For a second, she thought she saw a black SUV idling across the street, its headlights off. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a target. Sadie didn't even clock out. She threw her apron into the hamper, grabbed her coat, and ran out the back door into the alleyway. The rain was torrential now, soaking her instantly, but the cold fear in her stomach was colder than the water. Your father's accident wasn't an accident. The words looped in her mind like a broken record. Thomas Boyd had fallen into a mesmerizing machine at the textile plant. The company, Vanguard Textiles, had called it gross negligence on his part. They had denied the pension. They had denied the insurance. Sadie had been 20 at the time, left to raise a 10-year-old brother on $0. She kept her head down, moving through the shadows of the alley. She didn't take the bus. Pembroke's note said they were watching. Who were they? She hailed a cab 3 blocks away, using the cash tips from her pocket. "Un station," she told the driver, checking the rear-view mirror every few seconds. The station was a cavernous echo chamber at this hour. Homeless men slept on benches, and a janitor pushed a mop in lazy circles. Sadie gripped the brass key in her pocket so hard it cut into her palm. Locker 402 was in the old wing near the abandoned ticket booths. It was a bank of grey metal boxes that smelled of rust and time. Sadie found 402. It was dented near the bottom. She looked over her shoulder. A man in a blue maintenance uniform was watching her from across the hall. He looked away quickly when she turned. Paranoia or survival instinct. She jammed the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. Inside was a leather satchel. It was old, worn, and smelled of pipe tobacco, the same smell she remembered from her father's hugs. She pulled it out, her breath hitching. It was heavy. She couldn't open it here. It was too exposed. She clutched the bag to her chest and speed-walked toward the women's restroom. She locked herself in the furthest stall and sat on the closed toilet lid, her wet shoes squeaking on the tile. With trembling fingers, she undid the buckles. Inside were 3 things. 1, a stack of cash bound in rubber bands, all hundreds. It had to be at least $10,000. 2, a thick black notebook. 3, a photograph. She picked up the photograph first. It was grainy, taken from a distance. It showed 2 men arguing on a dock. One was her father, Thomas. He looked angry, pointing a finger. The other man... Sadie gasped. The other man was younger then, but unmistakable. It was the man who currently ran Vanguard Textiles, Charles Vane, the man who had denied her family's insurance claim. Standing next to Vane, looking down at the ground, was Austin Pembroke. She opened the black notebook. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger, columns of numbers, dates, and chemical formulas. On the very first page in her father's handwriting were the words, Project Chimera. They are dumping the runoff into the reservoir. The cancer rates in Sector 4 aren't a coincidence. Vane knows. Pembroke is funding the cover-up. If I die, this is the proof. Sadie felt the blood drain from her face. Sector 4 was the neighborhood where she and Leo grew up. It was the neighborhood where her mother had died of leukemia 3 years before her father's accident. It wasn't just an accident. It was murder. And Pembroke, the man who left her the tip, was listed right there as a conspirator. Why give her this now? Why give her the money? She flipped through the pages. Tucked in the middle was another note, written on the same stationery as the one in the diner. I couldn't save him. I was a coward. Vane has hired a cleaner to find the loose ends. You are the last loose end. The money is to get your brother and run. But if you want justice, don't run. Check the news tomorrow morning. I'm sorry. AP, check the news. Sadie pulled out her cracked smartphone. Her thumbs slipped on the wet screen as she refreshed the local news feed. Breaking news. Billionaire Austin Pembroke found dead in apparent suicide. Body discovered in luxury vehicle outside Lino's brasserie. Sadie nearly dropped the phone into the toilet water. The timeline didn't make sense. He had just left the diner 20 minutes ago, outside Lowe's brasserie. That wasn't Jerry's diner. Lowe's was across town. She reread the news alert, the photo of the car. It was the black SUV she had seen idling outside the diner. They had killed him. They had killed Pembroke moments after he left her. They had probably been waiting for him to lead them to the ledger. But he didn't have the ledger. She did. A heavy slam echoed in the bathroom. The main door had opened. "She came in here," a man's voice grunted. It wasn't the maintenance worker. It was deep growly. "Check the stalls." Sadie pulled her feet up onto the toilet seat, clutching the satchel. Her heart was beating so loud she was sure it would give her away. She heard heavy boots walking slowly across the tile. Thud, thud. They stopped at the first stall. Bang! The door was kicked open, empty. The boots moved to the second stall. Bang! Sadie was in the fourth stall. She looked around frantically. There was no window, no vent large enough to crawl through. "Come out, little girl," the voice sneered. "We know you have Thomas's book. Give it to us, and maybe you get to see your brother again." Leo. The threat flipped a switch in Sadie's brain. Fear vanished, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a mother or a sister who had been a mother for too long. She reached into her purse. She didn't have a gun. She had a can of pepper spray she carried for the late-night bus rides, and a heavy, jagged piece of metal, the locker key she was still clenching. The boots stopped in front of her stall. Sadie braced herself against the back wall. As the lock began to turn from the outside, likely picked or forced, she prepared to fight for her life. The lock on the stall door snapped with a metallic pop. As the door swung inward, Sadie didn't wait. She didn't scream. She exploded into motion. The man was huge, a wall of muscle in a cheap leather jacket, but he expected a cowering girl. He didn't expect a blast of pepper spray directly into his eyes. "Argue which," he roared, stumbling back, his hands clawing at his face. Sadie didn't stop. She lowered her shoulder and rammed him, not effectively enough to knock him down, but enough to off-balance him on the wet floor. He slipped his head, cracking against the porcelain sink with a sickening thud. She bolted. She burst out of the restroom and into the main terminal. The maintenance worker she had seen earlier was now on a walkie-talkie, his eyes locking onto her. "Target is moving main concourse," he shouted. "She wasn't dealing with thugs. She was dealing with a private army." Sadie sprinted toward the south exit. Her lungs burned. She could hear shouting behind her. She burst through the double doors into the pouring rain. A line of taxis waited. She ripped the back door of the first one open. "Drive." She screamed at the driver. "Just drive. Whoa, lady, where to? Anywhere. Just go." She threw a $100 bill from the stack onto the front seat. The driver saw the money and floored it. The taxi screeched away from the curb, just as the maintenance worker and another man in a suit burst through the station doors. Sadie slid down in the seat, hugging the leather satchel. She was safe for the moment, but she had a massive problem. They mentioned Leo. Maybe you get to see your brother again. If they knew who she was, they knew where she lived. They knew about the babysitter, Mrs. Gable. "Change of plans," Sadie said, her voice shaking. "I need to go to 4th and Elm fast. Please let me be in time." The taxi wove through the rainy streets. Sadie pulled out the ledger again. She needed to understand what she was holding. Why did Pembroke die for this? She flipped to the back pages. There were bank account numbers, Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and a list of names under the heading payroll, judges, city council members, even a police captain. This wasn't just about pollution. This was about a criminal empire built on poisoning a city to save money on waste disposal. Charles Vane had saved millions by dumping carcinogens into the water table, and he had paid off the entire city to look the other way. Sadie's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She shouldn't answer it. In the movies, you never answer it, but she pressed accept. "Hello, you're a hard woman to catch, Sadie," a smooth, cultured voice said. It sounded like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. "Who is this?" "I'm the man cleaning up Mr. Pembroke's mess. My name is Mr. Silas." "Wait, no names necessary. Let's make a deal. The book for the boy." Sadie's blood went cold. "If you touch him, I haven't touched him yet." "Mrs. Gable is a very sweet old lady. She's making tea right now. We are sitting in your living room, Sadie. It's quite small, cozy." "I'm calling the police," Sadie lied. "Go ahead. Captain Miller is on page 45 of the book you're holding. Who do you think he'll send to arrest me?" Sadie looked at the ledger. Page 45. There it was. Captain D. Miller. $5,000 monthly. She was trapped. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Bring the book to the old steel mill on the river. The one where your father had his accident. Fitting, don't you think? Come alone. 1 hour or Mrs. Gable runs out of tea." The line went dead. Sadie looked out the window. They were 2 blocks from her apartment. She could see her building. There was a black sedan parked in the fire lane. "Stop!" she yelled at the driver. "Here it's pouring, lady. Stop!" The taxi braked threw the door open. She couldn't go in there. If she walked into the apartment, they would kill her and Leo. They wanted the book. As long as she had the book, she had leverage. But she needed backup. She couldn't call the police. She couldn't call the media. It would take too long to verify. And Leo had an hour. She stood in the rain, the water matting her hair to her face. She looked at the satchel. Pembroke had left her money and evidence, but he had left one other thing in the note. Trust no one. Wait. She reread the note in her mind. Trust no one, especially not the police. But there was a name in the ledger she had seen earlier. A name that had a line drawn through it. A name that had refused written next to it in red ink. Jack Thorne, investigative journalist. If Vane had tried to bribe him and he refused, maybe he was the only ally she had. She Googled the name Jack Thorne, disgraced reporter fired from the Tribune for conspiracy theories. He ran a blog now. He lived above a pawn shop on the south side. Sadie looked at her watch. 50 minutes. She jumped back into the taxi. Take me to South Holstead, and hurry. A kid's life depends on it. As the taxi sped off, Sadie opened the satchel and took out the stack of money. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. Tonight, she was a woman at war. She began to formulate a plan. She wouldn't just hand over the book. She was going to burn Charles Vane's empire to the ground, or she would die trying. But first, she had to recruit a disgraced journalist who probably smelled like whiskey and regret. South Holstead Street smelled of wet pavement and desperation. The neon sign of Gold Star Pawn flickered with a seizure-inducing strobe effect. Sadie paid the cab driver, her hands trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline overdose. She had 38 minutes left. She found the side door peeling paint, announcing a P.S. Jack Thorne lived in 2B. She didn't buzz. She hammered on the door until her fist echdi. Minutes passed. Precious wasted minutes. Finally, a voice bellowed from the intercom, thick with sleep and irritation. Whoever you are, I don't have any money, and I already subscribed to Watchtower. Jack Thorne, my name is Sadie Boyd, Thomas Boyd, daughter. Open the door, or I swear I'll kick it in. Silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then the buzzer buzzed harshly. Sadie took the stairs 2 at a time. Apartment 2B was unlocked. She burst in. The apartment was a shrine to conspiracy and neglect. Newspapers were stacked in towers that reached the ceiling. Empty takeout containers formed small civilizations on the coffee table. Jack Thorne stood in the middle of it, wearing wrinkled boxers and a faded t-shirt holding a baseball bat. He looked like a man who had gone 12 rounds with life and lost every single one. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw covered in 3 days of graying stubble. "Boyd," Thorne grunted, lowering the bat slightly. "The textile foreman, 6 years ago." The accident. It wasn't an accident, Sadie said, her voice tight. She marched past him into the kitchen, dropping the heavy leather satchel onto a table covered in empty beer cans. "And you know it. That's why they fired you." Thorne let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his face. "Look, kid, I tried. I poked the bear. The bear swiped back, got me blacklisted from every reputable news outlet in the country, and now I write blog posts about UFOs for pennies. Go home. Vane won. Vane didn't win. Not yet." Sadie unbuckled the satchel. She bypassed the cash. Thorne didn't look like the type to be motivated by money anymore, and pulled out the black ledger. She slammed it onto the table, knocking over a beer can. It foamed onto the linoleum. "Austin Pembroke gave me this 20 minutes before they murdered him tonight." Thorne froze. The apathy vanished from his eyes, replaced by a razor-sharp intensity. "Pembroke is dead. Suicide, according to the news. Murder, according to the note he left me." Sadie flipped the ledger open. She didn't go to the chemical formulas. She went to the back to the payroll. She spun the book around so Thorne could read it. His finger traced the lines past the judges, past the police captain. His finger stopped on his own name. Jack Thorne, investigative journalist, $50,000 offer. Refused. Note, too righteous. Destroy his credibility. Thorne stared at the entry. His hands started to shake. It was vindication in black ink. He hadn't been crazy. He hadn't been sloppy. He had been targeted. They killed my father to cover up the dumping in Sector 4. Sadie said, her voice devoid of emotion now. They killed Pembroke because he grew a conscience. And right now, Charles Vane's personal fixer has my little brother at the old steel mill. He gave me 1 hour to bring him this book. She looked at her watch. I have 25 minutes. I can't call the cops. Vane owns them. I need someone who hates Vane as much as I do. Are you in, Jack, or are you just going to let them win forever?" Thorne looked from the book to Sadie's face. He saw the same fire in her eyes that he used to have. He straightened up. The drunk slob vanished. The newsman returned. The steel mill. Thorne muttered, his mind already racing. Smart. It's isolated, noisy. Good place for a trap. He said he'd trade the boy for the book. "He's lying," Thorne said, moving toward a closet piled high with junk. He started digging. "Vane doesn't leave loose ends. You hand over that book, you and your brother both go into the river." Sadie felt sick. "Then what do we do?" Thorne emerged from the closet holding a large professional-grade video camera and a digital audio recorder. He checked the battery packs. "We changed the narrative," Thorne said grimly. "You're going in there to make the trade. I'm going in the back way. I know that mill. I worked a summer there in college. There are catwalks up in the rafters. They won't be watching. You want me to just walk in there?" "He'll kill me." "He won't kill you until he verifies the book is real." "That buys us time." Thorne grabbed a dirty jacket. "We need to make a stop on the way. You have cash." Sadie showed him the stack of hundreds. "Good. We need burner phones, and we need to stop at a hardware store. If we're going to a war zone, we need ammunition." Sadie didn't ask what kind of ammunition. She just ran out the door, Thorne right behind her. The crusade was back on. The old sprawling Vanguard steel mill sat on the edge of the city like a rotting carcass. It had been closed for a decade, ever since Vane shifted focus to cheaper overseas textiles. It was a skeleton of rusted girders and broken glass looming against the rainy night sky. This was where Sadie's father had worked before the textile plant. This was where he had first noticed the illegal dumping protocols. It was a place of ghosts. Thorne parked his rattling sedan a4 mile down the service road, hidden behind a mound of slag. The rain had slackened to a cold drizzle that coated everything in a slick sheen. "Okay," Thorne whispered, checking his camera one last time. The red recording light blinked in the darkness. "I'm going for the east ventilation stack. I'll be high up. I need you to get them talking. Get Silas to admit why he wants the book. Get him to say Vane's name." He handed Sadie a small, cheap burner phone they had just bought. "I'm on speed dial 1. If it goes completely south, hit it. I'll cause a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" Sadie asked, eyeing the canvas bag of supplies they'd bought at the all-night hardware store. "The loud kind. Just buy me time to get in position." Thorne gripped her shoulder for a second. It was a surprising gesture of comfort. "You're tougher than you look, Boyd. Your dad would be proud. Now go." He melted into the shadows. Sadie took a deep breath, clutching the leather satchel tightly against her chest. It felt heavier now, loaded not just with the ledger, but with the fate of her family. She walked down the center of the muddy road toward the yawning entrance of the main smelting hangar. The silence was immense, broken only by the drip of water and her own crunching footsteps. Inside the mill was a cavern of shadows. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating massive dormant machinery that looked like sleeping dinosaurs. The smell of ancient soot and metal hung heavy in the air. In the center of the vast space, a single high-powered construction lamp sat on a crate, casting a harsh cone of white light. In the center of the light sat a wooden chair. Tied to it, gagged with a strip of cloth, was Leo. His eyes were wide with terror, red from crying. Standing next to him, casually leaning against a dormant hydraulic press, was the man from the phone, Mr. Silas. He wore an expensive raincoat over a suit, looking entirely out of place in the industrial graveyard. He held a silenced pistol loosely at his side. "Punctual," Silas said, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. "I appreciate that, Sadie. Step into the light, please. Let's see the merchandise." Sadie walked forward, her legs feeling like lead. She stopped 10 feet away, just at the edge of the light. "Leo," she choked out. "Are you okay?" Leo nodded frantically against the gag. "Let him go," Sadie demanded, holding up the satchel. "I brought the book. Let him walk out of here, then you get it." Silas chuckled a dry sound, like sandpaper on wood. Sadie, you're in no position to make demands. You're trespassing on private property, and you're holding stolen goods." He raised the pistol slightly, pointing it directly at Leo's kneecap. "The book now, or the boy never walks again." Sadie's breath hitched. She glanced up toward the rafters, praying Thorne was there, praying the camera was rolling. She had to get him talking. "Why is it so important?" Sadie asked, stalling. She took a slow step forward. "It's just an old notebook. Why kill Austin Pembroke for it? Why kidnap a child?" Silas's eyes narrowed. Mr. Pembroke was a weak link. He developed a conscience in his old age. Bad for business. And that book is the cornerstone of Mr. Bain's empire. It contains the proof that Vanguard Textiles saved $200 million over a decade by poisoning the groundwater in Sector 4 instead of paying for proper disposal. Silas smiled thinly. "It's just business, Sadie. Your father didn't understand that either. He wanted to be a hero. He threatened to go to the EPA, so we had to arrange his accident." Tears of rage blurred Sadie's vision. They admitted it. He admitted killing her father. "Who is we?" Sadie pushed. "You mean Charles Vane ordered it?" Before Silas could answer, a new voice emerged from the darkness behind the light. "Yes, Sadie, I did." Charles Vane stepped into the light. He was impeccably dressed, silver hair coiffed, looking every inch the titan of industry he was. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a kindly grandfather. He walked over to Leo and rested a hand almost gently on the boy's shoulder. Leo flinched violently. "A tragedy, really," Vane said smoothly, looking at Sadie. Thomas was a good foreman, but he lacked vision. He couldn't see the bigger picture. Pembroke was the same. Vane extended his hand. "The ledger, Sadie. It's over. You lost." Sadie looked at Leo, then at Vane. She knew with chilling certainty that Thorne was right. They were never walking out of here. Vane was here because he wanted to see the end personally. Slowly, defeatedly, Sadie walked forward and placed the leather satchel into Vane's outstretched hand. Vane opened it. He pulled out the black book. He thumbed through the pages, verifying the handwriting, the chemical tables, the payroll bribes. He nodded, satisfied. He tucked the book under his arm. "Excellent," Vane said. He turned to Silas. "Clean up this mess. Make it look like a drug deal gone wrong. Burn the building." Silas raised the silenced pistol, aiming it square at Sadie's chest. "No!" Leo screamed against his gag. Sadie didn't move. She stared at Vane. "You promised." "I lied," Vane said coldly, turning to walk away. "Goodbye, Sadie." Silas tightened his finger on the trigger. Sadie's hand flew into her jacket pocket. She didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out the burner phone Thorne had given her and jammed her thumb down on speed dial 1. The moment Sadie's thumb depressed the button on the burner phone, the world inside the steel mill exploded into chaos. Jack Thorne hadn't just been hiding in the rafters. He had been busy. From the darkness, nearly 40 feet above, a blinding white light erupted, a magnesium flare he had rigged to a counterweight. It hissed with the fury of a dying star plummeting straight down toward the circle of light where Silas stood. "What the?" Silas shouted, flinching as the flare slammed into the concrete floor just yards away, showering the area in blinding, sputtering sparks. Simultaneously, a deafening clang echoed through the hangar. Thorne had released the brake on an overhead gantry crane. A massive rusted steel hook the size of a small car swung down from the gloom like a pendulum of death. It missed Vane by inches, the wind of its passage blowing his expensive hair into his eyes, and smashed into the crate holding the construction light. The light shattered. The mill was plunged into near total darkness, illuminated only by the harsh, strobing white glare of the burning magnesium flare on the floor. "Get the boy!" Vane screamed, clutching the ledger to his chest and stumbling backward into the shadows. Silas, blinded by the flare and disoriented by the noise, fired his weapon wildly. Foot! 2 bullets sparked off the machinery near Sadie's head. Sadie didn't freeze. The adrenaline cocktail in her veins was pure survival. She dropped to her knees, sliding across the slick concrete toward Leo's chair. "Don't move, Leo!" she screamed. She reached her brother. His eyes were squeezed shut, his body shaking violently. Sadie fumbled in her pocket for the small pocket knife she used to open boxes at the diner. A flimsy thing, but sharp enough. She sawed frantically at the ropes binding his wrists. "Over there, I see the muzzle flash," Silas roared. He had regained his bearings. He leveled his gun toward the rafters where Thorne was perched. Bang! Silas didn't use the silencer this time. He was firing to kill. Up on the catwalk, Thorne cursed. He scrambled along the rusted grating, the camera heavy in his hand. He wasn't a soldier. He was a journalist with bad knees and a beer gut. But he had the one thing these men feared, the truth. And he was still rolling. "Hey, down here, you suit-wearing psychopath," Sadie yelled. She needed to draw fire away from Thorne and Leo. She grabbed a heavy iron wrench from the floor debris left behind by the workers years ago and hurled it into the darkness toward where Silas's voice had come from. It clattered loudly against a metal pillar. Silas spun around, firing 2 shots at the sound. "Run, Leo, go to the exit, do not stop." Sadie cut the last rope. "I'm not leaving you," Leo cried, his voice cracking. "Go!" Sadie shoved him hard toward the sliver of moonlight marking at the main doors. Leo stumbled, then turned and sprinted, his sneakers slapping against the wet concrete. Silas heard the boy running. He turned his gun toward the sound of the footsteps. He was cold, calculated. He wasn't going to let the leverage escape. Sadie saw the barrel of the gun track her brother. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She launched herself. She tackled Silas from the side, just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, pinging harmlessly off a girder. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Silas was stronger, trained in violence, but Sadie was fighting with the ferocity of a cornered animal. She clawed at his eyes, bit his hand, kicked at his shins. "Get off me, you!" Silas grunted, slamming an elbow into Sadie's ribs. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs, but she didn't let go of his gun arm. She slammed his wrist against the concrete floor. Once, twice. The gun skittered away into the darkness. Silas roared and backhanded her across the face. The force of the blow sent Sadie spinning away. She tasted copper. Her vision swam. Silas scrambled to his feet, breathing hard, straightening his jacket. He looked around for the gun, then looked at Sadie, who was trying to push herself up. He reached into his coat and pulled out a switchblade. "No more games," he hissed. He stepped toward her. Suddenly, a heavy thud shook the platform above. A figure dropped from the lower gantry, landing awkwardly on a pile of sandbags 10 ft away. It was Thorne. He had jumped. He groaned, clutching his ankle, but he pulled a flare gun from his belt. The second purchase from the hardware store. "Smile, you son of a Thorne," gritted out. He pulled the trigger. The flare hit Silas square in the chest. It didn't penetrate, but the impact staggered him, and the burning phosphorus ignited his expensive raincoat instantly. Silas screamed, batting at the flames engulfing his chest, falling backward over debris. "Sadie, move!" Thorne yelled, limping toward her. He grabbed her arm, hauling her up. Vane took the back exit. "He has the book." "Leo." Sadie gasped, clutching her ribs. "He made it out. I saw him clear the doors. We have to get Vane. If he destroys that book, this is all for nothing." Sadie wiped the blood from her lip. The pain in her ribs was sharp, agonizing, but the rage was hotter. "Let's go." They ran through the mill, guided by the flickering light of the fire. Silas was frantically trying to extinguish behind them. They burst out the rear heavy metal doors into the cool, rainy night. 50 yards away, near the riverbank, Charles Vane was struggling to climb a muddy embankment toward his parked SUV. He slipped his suit, mud-caked, clutching the leather satchel like a lifeline. "Vane!" Sadie screamed. Vane turned his face a mask of panic. He saw Sadie and Thorne pursuing him. He scrambled up the hill, reaching his car. He fumbled with his keys, dropped them in the mud, snatched them up. He ripped the door open and threw the satchel onto the passenger seat. He dove in, slamming the door. The engine roared to life. "He's going to get away!" Sadie cried, sprinting harder, ignoring the fire in her chest. Vane revved the engine, but instead of reversing, he gunned it forward, intending to run them down before speeding off. The high beams blinded Sadie. She froze. "Look out!" Thorne shoved her into the ditch just as the black SUV roared past, missing them by feet. Mud splattered over them. Vane fishtailed onto the gravel road, speeding toward the highway. He had the book. He had the money. He had survived. Sadie lay in the mud, watching the tail lights fade. Defeat crashed over her. "We lost," she whispered. "He has the proof. He'll burn it the second he gets home." Thorne sat up in the ditch, wiping slime from his face. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his smartphone. The screen was cracked, but it was glowing. He started to laugh, a wheezing, painful laugh. "What?" Sadie looked at him like he was crazy. "Why are you laughing?" Thorne turned the phone screen toward her. It showed a social media interface. The view count was ticking upward rapidly. 15402 watching now. "The camera I had in the rafters," Thorne said, grinning through a bloody lip. "It wasn't recording to a memory card. It was broadcasting via 5G directly to my old blog server and mirroring to 3 major streaming platforms. Vane's confession. Silas trying to shoot a kid. Vane admitting he ordered your father's murder." Thorne tapped the screen. "It's all in the cloud. Sadie, the world just watched Charles Vane confess to capital murder in real time." Sadie stared at the phone. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. "OMG, is this real? Call the FBI. That's Charles Vane. Did he just say he killed Thomas Boyd?" "He can burn the book," Thorne said, lying back in the mud with a satisfied sigh. "But he can't burn the internet." The fallout was not just swift. It was a seismic event that shattered the city's corrupt foundation. Because Jack Thorne's live stream had gone viral within seconds of the feed going live, Charles Vane never made it to his gated mansion. He didn't even make it to the sanctuary of his private airfield. A state trooper, alerted by dispatch about a suspect wanted for kidnapping and capital murder, armed and dangerous, spotted the mud-caked luxury SUV tearing down the interstate. The chase was brief but televised. News helicopters scrambled the moment Thorne's stream started trending on Twitter, and Reddit caught the arrest in high definition. The image of Charles Vane, billionaire philanthropist, untouchable titan of industry, being dragged out of his vehicle face, pressed into the wet asphalt handcuffs, clicking shut while he screamed about his lawyers, became the defining image of the decade. Inside the car on the passenger seat, police found the leather satchel. It was muddy and battered, but the contents were pristine. They found the ledger. They found the payroll list of bribed officials. They found the undeniable proof that Vanguard Textiles had poisoned a generation to save on disposal costs. By sunrise, the mayor had announced an emergency federal investigation. By noon, the police captain, named on page 45 of the book, had turned in his badge and gun, accepting a plea deal before the ink was even dry on his resignation. By dinner time, stock in Vanguard Textiles had plummeted so violently that trading was suspended on the New York Stock Exchange. Sadie didn't see any of this immediately. She was in a quiet room at St. Jude's Hospital, the steady, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor, the only sound replacing the roar of the steel mill. Her ribs were tightly taped, each breath a sharp reminder of the struggle, and her face was bruised. But she felt a lightness she hadn't known in 6 years. She sat in a chair next to the bed where Leo slept. He was under a heavy sedative to help him process the trauma, but he was safe. His chest rose and fell in a peaceful rhythm. Sadie held his hand, her thumb tracing the knuckles, grounding herself in the reality that they were alive. The door creaked open, and a nurse peeked in. "There's someone to see you, honey. He says he's the truth." Sadie smiled, a painful tug at her split lip. "Send him in." Jack Thorne hobbled in on crutches, his ankle wrapped in a thick bandage. He looked terrible unshaven, bruised, and wearing a hospital gown over his jeans. But his eyes were electric. He wasn't the defeated drunk she had found in the apartment. He was a man resurrected. "You look like you went 12 rounds with a freight train." Thorne grinned, easing himself into the spare chair. "You should see the other guys," Sadie whispered. Thorne pulled out his phone. "You have no idea, Sadie. The world is on fire. Vane is done. Silas is in critical condition under police guard. And my old editor at the Tribune, the one who fired me, he's left 14 voicemails begging me to come back as editor-in-chief." He showed her the screen. The headlines were everywhere. "Justice for Sector 4. Waitress and journalist expose Billionaire poison ring." "We did it," Sadie said, the reality finally sinking in. "It's actually over." "Not just over," Thorne corrected. "It's a new beginning. But listen, someone else is here to see you. Someone fancy." 2 days later, the dust had begun to settle. But the atmosphere in the city had shifted. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by a crisp, clear autumn sun that made the wet pavement sparkle. Sadie walked out of the hospital entrance, holding Leo's hand. He was quiet, still shaken, but the color had returned to his cheeks. A black sedan was waiting at the curb. It wasn't the menacing SUV of Vane's men, but a sleek, diplomatic Lincoln Town car. A chauffeur stood by the door, but it was the woman stepping out from the back seat who caught Sadie's attention. She was in her 50s, wearing a sharp navy business suit, radiating an air of calm competence. "Miss Boyd?" the woman asked. Sadie tensed instinctively, pulling Leo slightly behind her. Old habits died hard. "Who are you?" "My name is Eleanor Vance," the woman said, her voice soft but authoritative. "I am the executive of Austin Pembroke's estate." Sadie relaxed slightly, though her guard remained up. "Mr. Pembroke is dead. I saw the news." "Yes." Eleanor said, a shadow of genuine grief crossing her face. But Austin was a man who planned for every eventuality, including his own untimely exit. He amended his will and final instructions only 3 days ago. He left specific orders that should his death be ruled unnatural, and should the contents of a certain black ledger come to light, I was to find you immediately. She opened the back door of the car. "Please, there is somewhere we need to go. It won't take long." Sadie hesitated. She looked at Leo, then at Thorne, who was leaning against the hospital wall, waiting for his own ride. Thorne nodded. "Go ahead, kid. I'll be fine. I have a press conference to crash." Sadie nodded to Eleanor. Okay. They drove in silence through the city centre. The car was quiet, insulated from the noise of the traffic. They stopped in front of a towering glass skyscraper, the Pembroke Industries headquarters. It was a monolith of steel and glass reaching up into the clouds. They took a private elevator to the penthouse office. It was a vast open space lined with mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows. It felt lonely now, a silent monument to a man who had spent his life building an empire only to try and tear down its darkest parts in his final hours. Mr. Pembroke had no family, Eleanor explained, walking over to a massive oak desk that looked out over the skyline. He spent his life acquiring wealth, often by looking the other way, when men like Charles Vane cut corners. He regretted that deeply in his final months. He knew he was dying of cancer even before Vane had him killed. He wanted to clear his ledger. She picked up a thick cream-coloured envelope from the desk and handed it to Sadie. He set up a blind trust. Eleanor continued. It is funded by the liquidation of his personal assets. The primary goal of the trust is the environmental restoration of Sector 4 and full medical compensation for every single family affected by the Vanguard dumping. Sade's breath hitched. Everyone, including retroactive payments for those who have passed. Eleanor paused, her eyes kind. But there is a separate stipulation for you. Sadie opened the envelope. Inside were complex legal documents, but on top was a cashier's check. The number was staggering. It wasn't just get-by money. It was never worry again money. It was enough to buy Jerry's diner 10 times over. It was enough to buy a house with a big yard for Leo. It was enough to breathe for the rest of her life. Sadie stared at the check, her hands trembling. Why? She whispered, looking up at Eleanor with tear-filled eyes. I don't understand. I was just a waitress to him. He came in, ate a steak, and left me a $2 tip. He insulted me. He didn't insult you, Sadie. He tested you, Eleanor said gently. Eleanor walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling city below. Austin told me about that night. He said he saw Thomas in your eyes. He knew that if he left you a check for $5,000, you would have been grateful. You would have paid your rent, bought groceries, and gone back to work. You would have been safe, but you would have stayed silent. Eleanor turned back to Sadie. He needed you angry. He knew that gratitude makes people complacent, but righteous anger makes people fight. He needed someone with the fire to finish what he was too afraid to start. He bet his entire legacy that the insult of a $2 tip would push you to look under the plate. Sadie looked down at the check, then at the city through the window. She thought about the rage she had felt that night. He was right. That rage had fueled her through the rain, through the fear, through the fire of the steel mill. He bet everything on you, Sadie, Eleanor said, and he won. Sadie walked to the window. From this height, the city looked peaceful. Far in the distance, she could see the smokestacks of the steel mill, now silent and cordoned off as a crime scene. She could see the grid of streets in Sector 4, where her father had lived and died, trying to do the right thing. She reached up and touched the cheap silver locket around her neck. We got him, Dad, she whispered, her voice choking with emotion. We really got him. They can't hurt anyone else. Leo walked up beside her, slipping his small hand into hers. He looked at the view, then up at his sister. Sadie, does this mean we don't have to be scared anymore? Sadie squeezed his hand. She thought about the ledger. She thought about Jack Thorne, who was probably already writing the book that would make him famous again. She thought about the 2 crumpled dollar bills she still had in her pocket, the insult that saved their lives. She turned to her brother. For the first time in 6 years, the weight was gone from her shoulders. The smile on her face wasn't the forced, polite smile of a waitress trying to make rent. It was the radiant, terrifyingly beautiful smile of a woman who had walked through hell and come out the other side. "No, Leo," she said softly. "We never have to be scared again." "So, what do we do now?" Leo asked. Sadie looked at the check, then back at the city. She knew exactly what she was going to do. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to build. Now, Sadie laughed, a sound that felt like freedom. "Now, we go get the biggest steak in the city, and we leave the waitress a massive tip." Sadie Boyd went from counting quarters to taking down an industrial empire, all because one man knew that sometimes a spark of anger is more valuable than a pot of gold. Austin Pembroke didn't just leave a tip, he left a mission. Charles Vane is currently serving 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Jack Thorne won a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage of the Vanguard scandal. And Sadie, she bought Jerry's Diner. She renamed it Thomas's Place, dedicated to the father who started the fight. And if you go there today, look right above the cash register, framed in glass. You'll see 2 crumpled $1 bills, a constant reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover, and you should never, ever underestimate a waitress. What an incredible journey. It just goes to show that justice can come from the most unlikely places. If you enjoyed this story of mystery, courage, and the ultimate revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with a friend who needs a win today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.